Welcome back to Strategic Affairs. I'm Dr. Naim Tahir Baig, and this is part 2 of our series testing the Poland-Ukraine comparison against the historical record. Last time we looked at how this analogy actually gets used today. This time we go back to where it started, 1939, and tell Poland's real story. Peace for our time. Neville Chamberlain said that in September 1938. 11 months later, the country he'd just carved up a deal for didn't exist as an independent state anymore, and a new country, Poland, was being invaded from two directions at once. Everyone name drops Munich. Almost nobody actually walks through what happened between the handshake and the invasion. So let's do that, because the details matter enormously for whether this comparison to Ukraine actually holds up. The Munich Agreement itself wasn't even about Poland. Britain, France, Germany and Italy sat down and agreed that Germany could annex the Sudetenland, a German-speaking border region of Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia itself wasn't even in the room. Here's a detail that rarely makes it into the popular version of this story. Poland wasn't a passive bystander in this crisis. During the same episode, Poland annexed a small border region of Czechoslovakia for itself, the Zolzy area. It's a footnote historians note carefully, because it complicates the tidy Poland as pure victim framing that shows up in a lot of modern commentary. 6 months later, in March 1939, Germany broke the Munich deal entirely and occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia. That's the moment historians generally treat as the real turning point. The moment Britain and France stopped believing negotiation with Hitler specifically could work. Just weeks after Czechoslovakia fell, Chamberlain stood up in the House of Commons and promised Poland Britain's full support if its independence were clearly threatened, and Poland resisted with its own forces. France backed the same commitment. This became, a few months later, a formal Anglo-Polish defense treaty, signed on August 25, 1939. Here's the part that gets lost. This guarantee was, by design, a political signal, not an actual war plan. There was no standing joint command between British, French and Polish forces. No pre-positioned troops, no integrated planning for how anyone would actually relieve Poland if it were attacked. It was a promise to declare war, not a promise of military rescue. And that distinction turned out to matter enormously, because 2 days before that formal treaty was even signed, something happened that made the guarantee almost meaningless. Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression treaty, and attached to it, secretly, was a protocol carving up Eastern Europe, including Poland, into spheres of influence. The line ran roughly along the Narew, Vistula and San rivers. Poland's future, the document said, would be settled in the course of further political developments. About as chilling a euphemism as you'll find in a 20th century diplomatic document. That pact removed Germany's single biggest strategic fear, a two-front war. With the Soviets neutralized, worse, secretly complicit, Germany invaded on September 1, 1939. 16 days later, on September 17th, the Soviet Union invaded from the east, exactly as the secret protocol had arranged. Poland was now being crushed from two directions simultaneously, Germany from the west and north, the USSR from the east. Organized Polish resistance collapsed in roughly 5 weeks. Britain and France did declare war on September 3rd, honoring the guarantee on paper, but they launched no offensive operations capable of actually relieving Poland. When Poland's ambassador in London tried to invoke the treaty against Soviet invasion too, Britain said no. Its commitment, under the secret protocol attached to its own agreement, covered only German aggression. Poland was partitioned by both invaders. As a sovereign, self-governing state, it ceased to exist. Not just for the war, but in a modified, Soviet-dominated form for decades afterward. This is the question that actually matters for the modern comparison, and it's worth sitting with. Was it the weakness of the guarantee that killed Poland, or something else entirely? Look at the actual sequence again. Two great powers invading simultaneously from multiple directions, with explicit war aims that included the elimination of Poland as an independent state, and the deliberate targeting of its administrative and political elite. That's not a story primarily about an insufficiently strong piece of paper. That's a story about geography and intent. And that raises an obvious question. What happens when you take away the two fronts, total destruction part, but keep the no real alliance guarantee part? Does the country still collapse in 5 weeks? There's actually a real-world answer to that question from the exact same year, involving a country almost nobody brings up in this conversation. That's next episode, and it changes the whole picture. Poland's collapse wasn't a simple morality tale about appeasement. It was two great powers acting in secret coordination, attacking from opposite directions, with the explicit goal of erasing a country. Any honest comparison to a modern war has to reckon with that, not just with the fact that a Western guarantee turned out to be more symbolic than operational. Next time, Finland. Attacked the same year with no alliance guarantee at all, arguably a worse position than Poland's, and it didn't disappear. We'll break down exactly why not and what it tells us about Ukraine.